Chapter 1. Mission in the Dark. Under the hustle and bustle of the city, there are countless unknown secrets. Laura is a person who sneaks in such darkness. She is a killer who has been adopted and trained by the killer organization since she was a child. At first she was full of resistance to this bloody life. Every time she carried out a mission, it was like a struggle with her conscience. But as time went by, when she gradually learned that the organization's mission targets were all extremely evil people who committed evil in the sun, but the law could do nothing about them, her heart began to change, and she gradually accepted her fate as a dark judge. This time the organization gave her the task of assassinating the actual controller of a business empire. This business empire is like a towering giant, famous in the business circle, and its influence spreads in all directions like ripples, affecting all industries. Its rise is legendary, built by a man from scratch, but strangely very few people know the true face of this man. He was like a ghost hidden in the darkness, controlling everything but never appearing in the public eye. Laura knew the difficulty of this mission. After careful consideration, she decided to try to get into the group first, and use this as an opportunity to slowly find clues to the target. She was like a cheetah lurking in the dark, quietly waiting for the best time to attack. Chapter 2. Encounter in a Cafe. Laura searched everywhere on the internet like looking for a needle in a haystack, and finally contacted someone who claimed to be able to introduce her to the group. The two agreed to meet in a cafe. It was a sunny afternoon. The sun shone through the glass of the cafe, casting warm yellow on the wooden tables and chairs. The cafe was filled with the aroma of coffee, and soft jazz music flowed in the air, soothing and comfortable. Laura arrived at the agreed place early. She was wearing a simple dress. The light blue skirt swayed gently as she walked. Her long hair was casually draped over her shoulders, and a few strands of hair fell beside her fair cheeks, making her eyes calm and alert. She chose a corner by the window to sit down, where she could clearly see the people coming at the door, but it was relatively hidden. After ordering a cup of black coffee, she waited quietly, tapping her fingers on the table from time to time. After a while, a man walked into the cafe. He was tall and dressed in casual clothes, a simple white t-shirt with dark blue jeans, and his posture was agile. When he walked, he had a sense of neatness that only long-term exercise could give him. There was a hint of fatigue and expectation in his eyes. He scanned the crowd and finally walked straight towards Laura. Laura subconsciously thought that he was the person she was waiting for, and the corners of her mouth raised politely, ready to say hello. But the man said first, "Sorry I'm late. Have you been waiting for a long time?" The voice was low and magnetic, with a hint of subtle tension. Laura was keenly aware that something seemed to be wrong. She frowned slightly and was about to explain, but the man started talking again. "I have never been good at blind dates. I was confused and almost went to the wrong place." Laura realized that the man had recognized the wrong person. Just as she was about to get up and leave and explain the misunderstanding to the man immediately introduced himself. "My name is Ryan. I work as a security guard at Atlas Group. What about you?" Hearing the words Atlas Group, Laura's heart suddenly moved and her steps stopped. A thought quickly flashed through her mind that this mistake might be an opportunity for her to get closer to her goal. So she calmly sat back down with a gentle smile on her face and said, "My name is Laura, nice to meet you." Ryan seemed relieved and responded with a smile, "I'm glad too. To be honest, I've always been resistant to blind dates, but meeting you today feels pretty special." Laura took a sip of coffee, looked at Ryan calmly and asked, "Oh? How special?" Ryan scratched his head and said shyly, "Maybe it's your eyes, which are very clear and reveal an indescribable determination, unlike the people I usually see in the company." Laura was secretly alert in her heart, but she smiled lightly on the surface and teased, "It seems that the people in your company are very complicated?" Ryan smiled bitterly and shook his head. "It's not complicated, it's just that in that kind of big group, everyone is busy with their own things and there is not much communication. I work in security, and I have even less interaction with people from other departments." Laura raised her eyebrows and continued to test, "It must be very hard to be a security guard, right?" Ryan shrugged and said nonchalantly, "I'm used to it. I patrol the company every day to ensure everyone's safety. Although the work is a bit monotonous, it is also very practical. Moreover, the company's welfare is not bad." Then Ryan began to talk about his daily work in the group, saying that he had to patrol each floor several times a day, familiar with every entrance and exit and monitoring blind spot, and had to deal with emergencies at any time. He described those daily trivial matters, and Laura seemed to listen carefully, but in fact she was analyzing this information quickly in her mind, trying to find clues related to the boss of the group. As time went by, more and more people came to the cafe, and the noise around them became louder and louder, but Laura and Ryan seemed to be in their own little world and talked happily. Before they knew it, the short meeting time had passed for a long time. Laura realized that she couldn't chat anymore and she had to make the next step for her plan. So she looked at her watch and pretended to be surprised and said, "Time flies so fast. I have something to do. I have to go first." Ryan's face flashed a trace of disappointment, but he quickly adjusted himself and said with a smile, "Okay, I'm very happy to chat with you today. I hope we can meet again in the future." Laura stood up, adjusted her skirt and responded with a smile, "I'm very happy too. Let's chat next time." When leaving the cafe, Laura felt mixed emotions. She knew that she had taken the first step of her plan, but the inexplicable feeling when facing Ryan made her feel a little uneasy. Ryan looked at Laura's back as she left, and he didn't come back to his senses for a long time. This unexpected girl seemed to have caused a wave in his peaceful life. Chapter 3. First exploration of the group. During the days she spent with Ryan, Laura quietly inquired about the boss of the group. She always led the topic to the inside of the group in a seemingly casual manner, and cleverly asked about various details. To her surprise, no one in the entire group had ever seen the boss's true appearance except for the boss's right-hand man, as if the boss did not exist in the real world at all, but was just an illusory legend. Every time Ryan talked about the boss, he was also at a loss, only saying that the boss had an extraordinary business mind and led the group to overcome all obstacles and move towards glory. Laura's doubts became more and more intense, but this also strengthened her determination to investigate in depth. She decided to take the opportunity of delivering food to Ryan to enter the group to find out. That day, Laura called Ryan and said she would deliver food to him. Laura's tone was gentle and full of concern. "Ryan, I made your favorite dish for you and will send it to you later." After hearing the news, Ryan on the other end of the phone tightened his hand holding the phone unconsciously, with a hint of tension that was difficult to conceal in his voice, and his speech speed obviously accelerated. He stammered, Don't bother so much, the food in the company cafeteria is not bad today." But Laura insisted, "It's okay, you work so hard, it will be better to eat some of my food." After hanging up the phone, Laura carefully prepared the food and packed them in exquisite lunch boxes. Each dish was full of her purpose. She came to the door of the group company, and the guard looked at her vigilantly as usual, with scrutiny in his eyes. Laura dialed Ryan's phone leisurely, and the guard let her go after confirming on the intercom. After waiting at the door for a long time, Ryan hurriedly appeared. Laura noticed at a glance that his forehead was covered with dense sweat, and beads of sweat slid down his temples. He looked flustered, and his originally neat security uniform was now a little wrinkled. He looked like he had just experienced a flustered run. The whole person seemed out of place in front of this building full of elite atmosphere. He ran to Laura with a heavy breath and forced a smile with a bit of unnatural voice. "Sorry, the company is a bit busy today, so I came late." Laura looked at him calmly and asked with concern, "Why are you sweating so much? Are you uncomfortable?" Ryan waved his hands quickly, his eyes flickering. It's okay, I just ran a little too fast just now." While speaking, Laura keenly caught Ryan's eyes, subconsciously glancing to the side. She looked in the direction and saw a young man with a figure similar to Ryan standing not far away, observing this side calmly. After the two people's eyes met, the young man nodded slightly and turned away. Following Ryan into the company, Laura walked and looked around quietly. The interior of the company was luxurious and grand, with a shiny marble floor and a crystal chandelier above. The employees were dressed in neat suits and walked hurriedly. Everyone was nervous and busy. Ryan took Laura to the rest area and kept greeting the employees passing by. The employees looked at Ryan with the casualness of ordinary security personnel, but Ryan's familiarity with the surrounding environment did not seem to be limited to security work. His occasional comments on the company's layout and business, although understated, revealed an understanding beyond the ordinary security cognition, which made Laura more suspicious. In the rest area, Ryan found a place for Laura to sit down, and his eyes were always wandering around. Laura used the excuse of going to the bathroom, but in fact she wanted to take the opportunity to walk around the company. She walked along the corridor, not missing any corner, with eyes as sharp as a hawk. At the end of the corridor she found a locked office with the house number 007. The number on it seemed to have been deliberately wiped, but it left a trace. What secrets were hidden behind it? She tried to turn the door handle and found that the door was locked tightly. After that she came to the elevator and pressed the button to go to the upper floors. The elevator door slowly opened and several employees inside were discussing an important project enthusiastically. When they mentioned the boss's decision, their faces were full of awe. Laura pretended to listen to their conversation casually, trying to get more information from it. However, after searching for a while she found nothing, which made her feel very frustrated. Chapter 4. Doubts in Ryan's home. In order to have more opportunities for action later, Laura had to continue to maintain her relationship with Ryan. In her eyes, Ryan was just a key way for her to complete her mission. Every time she faced Ryan's enthusiasm, she silently reminded herself in her heart that this was just a carefully planned performance. One weekend, Ryan invited Laura to visit his home, and Laura readily agreed. She knew in her heart that this might be a good opportunity for her to obtain key information. The afternoon sun was a little lazy, and Laura came to the community where Ryan lived according to the address. This is an upper-middle-class community with a clean environment, good greening, and certain security measures for access control. While Laura was waiting at the door, she saw Ryan walking quickly. He had a warm smile on his face, but Laura keenly caught the subtle tension in his eyes. Walking into Ryan's home, the decoration style of the house is simple but stylish. There is a set of fabric sofas with good texture in the living room. Although it is not a top brand, it can be seen from the material and style that it is expensive. There are several art paintings hanging on the wall, with delicate brushstrokes and harmonious color matching, exuding a unique artistic atmosphere, which is by no means comparable to ordinary home decoration paintings. The solid wood flooring on the ground has clear and natural textures. When you step on it barefoot, you can feel the warm texture of the wood. It is obviously a carefully selected high-quality material. Laura quietly looked at the layout of the house, secretly evaluating it in her heart, but pretended to be casually appreciating it. She chuckled and said, "Your home is very tastefully decorated. It must be very comfortable to live in." Ryan smiled, a hint of unnaturalness flashed in his eyes, and said, "Thank you, I just tidied it up." Laura narrowed her eyes slightly. She noticed that Ryan's answer was a bit perfunctory, which was completely different from his usual frankness when he was with her, which made her more confused. Inadvertently, she saw a painting hanging on the wall and there was a little girl in the painting. Laura's eyes were instantly attracted. She felt that the portrait was very familiar, as if she had seen it somewhere, but she couldn't remember who it was for a while. Some vague pictures flashed in her mind, but she couldn't put them together clearly. She pointed at the portrait and turned to ask Ryan, "The little girl in the painting is so cute, who is she?" Ryan was slightly stunned, with a hint of tenderness in his eyes, and said, "This is a friend of mine when I was a child. She is very important to me." Laura noticed that when Ryan said this, there was a trace of nostalgia and sadness in his eyes that was difficult to conceal, which made her more curious about the identity of this little girl. Then Laura walked into the study. The study was filled with a faint scent of books. A solid wood desk was placed in the middle of the room, with some documents and office supplies on the table. Laura pretended to flip through the documents on the table casually. Suddenly, she found that the cover of one of the documents was printed with the group's logo, and the content of the document seemed to involve the group's core business and some high-level secrets. She was startled and just wanted to check it carefully. She heard Ryan's footsteps at the door. She quickly put down the documents and turned to face Ryan with a smile. Ryan walked into the study and saw Laura looking through the documents. His face changed slightly but soon returned to normal and said, "These are some ordinary documents of the company. There is nothing to see." Laura smiled and nodded, but she was secretly thinking in her heart, how could an ordinary security guard get access to such core documents of the group? What secrets are hidden in it? After leaving the study, Laura turned around in other rooms and found that although the clothes in the closet were not all branded, they were all of good quality and novel styles. There were several shirts made of fabrics. She judged from experience that the price was definitely not low, and it was not something that an ordinary security guard could easily afford. She also noticed that there was an exquisite watch in a drawer. The dial was simple and atmospheric, and the strap material was superior. Although the brand was not top-notch luxury, it was also high-end, which was incompatible with Ryan's identity. After visiting the entire house, Laura's doubts grew like a snowball. She knew that Ryan was by no means an ordinary security guard, and there must be a huge secret behind his identity. But Laura thought about it, who doesn't have some unknown past? Just like she, as a killer, also concealed her true identity from Ryan. Maybe Ryan's secrets have no substantial connection with the mission she is carrying out. As long as he does not hinder her from finding the boss of the group and completing the assassination mission, then what secrets he has are not within her scope of concern. Her purpose of coming here is clear and firm, which is to complete the mission assigned by the organization. Other things are not important. Chapter 5. Lucy's appearance. Later, Laura went to the group company several times through Ryan. Every time she went, Ryan's performance was a little unnatural, and he seemed to be a little resistant to Laura's sudden arrival. When Laura asked to go to other floors, Ryan always found various reasons to shirk, and there was a trace of uneasiness in his eyes. But Laura was only thinking about completing the task and didn't pay much attention to Ryan's abnormality. Until one day Ryan asked Laura to have dinner at his house and brought back a girl named Lucy. Ryan saw the doubt in Laura's eyes, fearing that she would misunderstand, and hurriedly pulled her to sit on the sofa, looking serious and a little anxious, and said, "Laura, don't think too much. Lucy was my lifesaver when I was a child, and I called her here today just to thank her in person." Ryan began to talk about the past that he couldn't bear to look back on, and his voice unconsciously lowered, with a bit of pain that was hard to let go. "When I was a child, I was kidnapped and locked up in a dark and damp abandoned warehouse. The kidnappers were fierce and cruel. I lived in fear every day and felt that I would definitely die there. Just when I was most desperate, Lucy appeared. She was small at the time, but she bravely led the kidnappers away and even grilled meat for me when I was about to faint from hunger. In the end, in order to help me escape, she was caught by the kidnappers, was seriously injured, and almost lost her life. Over the years, I have been looking for her, just to repay her for saving my life." While Ryan was telling all this, Laura observed Lucy calmly. Lucy's eyes were erratic and she did not listen to Ryan's memories attentively, but kept looking at Ryan's home, revealing a trace of greed and calculation in her eyes. Her eyes swept over those exquisite ornaments and expensive furniture one by one, as if she was estimating the value of these things. Occasionally she would agree with Ryan, "Yes, those days were terrible. I was also very scared at the time, but when I thought about you still suffering, I couldn't care so much." But her tone seemed a little perfunctory and her smile was very deliberate. Laura couldn't help but feel suspicious. She felt that Lucy's performance was too artificial, and it didn't seem like she was really reminiscing about the past. And from the previous interactions, Ryan had always been honest with her, but today when facing Lucy he didn't seem to notice the other party's abnormality, or he wanted to believe that Lucy was his savior too much and chose to ignore these details. Laura remained calm on the surface, nodded slightly, pretending to understand, and said, "So that's the case. I really thank Lucy for saving you back then." But she secretly decided in her heart to pay more attention to Lucy's every move. Maybe this woman who suddenly appeared would bring her unexpected clues, or she would become a variable in her mission. Chapter 6. Competition at the dining table. When Lucy heard Laura say this, she began to cry about her hard life. She claimed that she had suffered a serious neck injury because she helped Ryan stop the bad guys. As she spoke, she pointed to a scar on her neck, which was particularly glaring on her fair neck. Her voice was tearful, and she told how she had struggled in poverty over the years and had to do all kinds of hard work to make a living. Laura looked at Lucy crying and felt annoyed. She felt that Lucy's performance was a bit too exaggerated, as if she was deliberately performing. Ryan's face also became a little ugly, and there was a more scrutiny in his eyes. He seemed to have doubts about Lucy's words. Lucy seemed to have noticed the change in Ryan's attitude. In order to save the situation, she offered to grill for Ryan, saying that she wanted to find back the few memories they had. She skillfully picked up the grilling tools and began to prepare the ingredients, and her movements seemed skillful. The meat was grilled, and Ryan tasted it expressionlessly, while Lucy looked at Laura proudly as if she was demonstrating to her, declaring that she would definitely snatch Ryan from Laura. Ryan put down the fork in his hand and suddenly asked Lucy, "How did your cooking become so good?" Lucy was stunned for a moment, then replied embarrassedly, "So you still remember? I always thought you forgot. I have been honing my cooking skills slowly over the years, hoping to grill meat for you again one day." Ryan's eyes became a little complicated and unpredictable. He seemed to be trapped in memories, and the scene of the little girl grilling meat for him emerged in his mind. The meat was not delicious, even a little burnt, but in his eyes at that time he was hungry and cold, and it was the most delicious food in the world. The three people had their own thoughts during the meal, and the atmosphere was extremely depressing. Laura suppressed her inner boredom and ate the meal bite by bite. Her eyes wandered between Ryan and Lucy from time to time, trying to capture more information from their expressions and words. Lucy kept trying to please Ryan, talking non-stop. Her voice was sharp and harsh. Ryan seemed a little absent-minded, and his thoughts seemed to have drifted far away. Finally, this tormenting dinner ended. Laura took a deep breath and couldn't wait to leave this suffocating place. When she left, she told Ryan that she would continue to bring him food tomorrow. Ryan smiled bitterly and agreed reluctantly. After hearing this, Lucy suddenly said that she also wanted to take a look, saying that she wanted to broaden her horizons. Ryan was obviously unhappy and his brows were slightly frowned, but he didn't know what he thought of, but he agreed immediately. Chapter 7. The truth begins to emerge. The next day, Laura and Lucy appeared at the door of the company at the same time. When Lucy saw that Ryan was just an ordinary security guard, her face suddenly became very ugly, and her eyes that were originally full of expectations suddenly became empty and angry. Her lips trembled slightly as if she wanted to say something, but in the end she just glared at Ryan fiercely, turned around and left in a rage without even saying a few words to Ryan. Ryan explained to Laura somewhat awkwardly that he was actually the captain of the security team and had some money saved, so he decorated the house well. He didn't expect Lucy to mistake him for a rich man. At the same time, Ryan also revealed to Laura that he felt that Lucy could not be his savior at all. Because the conditions were difficult at that time, the meat roasted by the little girl could be said to be very unpalatable, but in his opinion, it was a rare delicacy when he was hungry and cold at that time. And although the little girl was injured in the neck because of saving him, it was definitely not the position, Lucy said. After much investigation, Ryan concluded that Lucy was a liar, and he didn't know where she got these details from and wanted to profit from it. Laura listened to Ryan's explanation and subconsciously touched the back of her neck. There used to be a scar there, but she had removed it long ago in order to carry out various tasks. Listening to Ryan's description, Laura felt an indescribable feeling in her heart, and some intermittent images kept flashing in her mind. It was a night of thunder and lightning, and bean-sized raindrops hit the ground, stirring up layers of water. Laura, who was undergoing field training, relied on her keen hearing cultivated by the killer organization to catch the faint crying in the wind. She followed the sound and found an abandoned warehouse with a half-open door, revealing a faint light. She approached quietly and heard the kidnappers shouting and cursing from inside. "Why hasn't this kid's family sent the ransom yet? My patience is limited." A rough voice sounded. "Wait a little longer, they dare not play tricks. This damn place is damp and broken, it's really not a place for people to stay." Another voice complained. Laura carefully looked through the gap and saw a little boy tied to a pillar in the corner of the warehouse, his face full of tears and his eyes full of fear. A strong desire to protect him surged in her heart, and she decided to help. She went around the back of the warehouse, found a broken window and climbed in quietly. Like a ghost in the dark night, she quickly approached the kidnappers and used the fighting skills she learned in the organization to cleanly and neatly deal with the kidnapper closest to her. The other kidnappers noticed something was wrong and surrounded them. Laura was not afraid and fought fiercely with them. She was flexible and used both fists and feet to deal with the kidnappers in the small warehouse space. The little boy watched all this in horror and cried even louder. While fighting, Laura kept an eye on the safety of the little boy. After a fierce battle, she finally subdued all the kidnappers. She quickly ran to the little boy and cut the rope with the dagger she carried with her. The little boy was hungry and scared and trembling all over. Laura found some dry firewood and a piece of dried meat that someone had dropped in the warehouse, and started a fire in the corner. Because the fire was difficult to control, the meat was burnt on the outside and tender on the inside, and it didn't look very good. But the little boy ate it voraciously as if it was the most delicious food in the world. Just as they were about to leave, a kidnapper hiding in the dark suddenly rushed out, holding a dagger in his hand and stabbed the little boy. Laura reacted quickly, stood sideways in front of the little boy, and was cut on the back of her neck with blood flowing down her neck. She endured the severe pain, turned around and knocked the kidnapper down, and after confirming that there was no danger, she took the little boy out of the warehouse. Could Ryan be the little boy? But those memories were too vague, she was not sure, and she decided to investigate again. So Laura pretended to be indifferent, shook her head at Ryan, and said that she didn't have any other ideas. Chapter 8. The Choice Between Love and Mission. As the days passed, Laura still had no clues about the actual controller of the group, and her relationship with Ryan became more and more natural. Laura never told Ryan that she was his savior. Every time she saw Ryan still looking for his savior, she thought Ryan was very cute. She enjoyed the time with Ryan, watching him work hard for life, listening to him share his daily joys and sorrows, and deep in her heart, a different feeling was quietly spreading. Until one day the two of them met for a picnic on the lawn in the park. The sun was shining warmly on the ground, the grass was green, the flowers were blooming, and the air was filled with a fresh breath. Laura made barbecue for Ryan. She carefully prepared the ingredients and recalled the scene of grilling for the little boy when she was a child. The technique also unconsciously imitated the past. When she handed the grilled meat to Ryan, her eyes were full of expectations. Ryan took the barbecue and ate a few bites. The originally enjoyable expression suddenly froze. He stood up in surprise and blurted out, "Your grilled meat is still so bad." As soon as the words fell, the two smiled at each other. This familiar smell made Ryan instantly recognize Laura as the lifesaver he had been looking for. Laura looked at Ryan with tenderness in her eyes and began to tell him about the time she saved him when she was a child. She described in detail the dangers in the abandoned warehouse on that night of thunder and lightning, and how she carefully sneaked in and fought with the kidnappers. She mentioned the terrified and helpless look in the boy's eyes when she found him. The poor conditions made the meat not roasted well, but the boy was very satisfied with it. And the moment when she was leaving, the kidnapper suddenly appeared and she was scratched on the back of her neck to protect the boy. Every detail perfectly matched the scene in Ryan's memory. Ryan listened to Laura's story, his eyes gradually moistened, and his heart was full of emotion and surprise. He held Laura's hand tightly and said excitedly, "This is fate destined by God. It turns out that you have always been by my side." At this beautiful moment, the seeds of love took root in the hearts of the two. Chapter 9. The End of the Mission. Since Ryan recognized Laura as his savior, the relationship between the two has become deeper, like a vine growing vigorously in spring, tightly entwined and inseparable. They strolled together in the streets and alleys of the city, exploring the small food shops hidden in the corners. They fed the swans together by the lake in the park, sharing each other's deepest secrets. They waited for the sunrise together on the top of the mountain, feeling the warmth of the first ray of sunlight on their bodies. Every moment has become a precious memory of their love. Ryan's gentleness and affection made Laura gradually let go of her guard. She began to look forward to the future with Ryan, but the identity of the killer and the unfinished mission were like haze, always shrouding her heart. On this day, Ryan carefully planned a very romantic proposal. He took Laura to a top luxury hotel, which stood in the center of the city like a shining palace. Entering the hotel, the luxurious atmosphere hit her face, and the crystal chandelier emitted a dazzling light, illuminating the entire hall with golden splendor. The floor is paved with smooth marble reflecting people's elegant figures. The walls around are hung with priceless art paintings, each telling a unique story. The air is filled with the faint fragrance of flowers and the tempting aroma of food, which makes people intoxicated. Ryan took Laura to a private room, which was decorated warmly and romantically. The rose petals were paved in the shape of a heart, which was delicate and exuded a charming fragrance. The flickering light of the candles created a dreamlike atmosphere. Ryan took a deep breath and pulled Laura to sit down slowly on the sofa. His eyes were full of affection and solemnity. He held Laura's hand tightly and began to confide in her with a slightly trembling voice. "Laura, there are some things I have been hiding from you and I have to tell you. In fact, I am the actual controller of this business empire. I know you may have noticed that I am not an ordinary security captain. Every time you come to the company, I ask my brother to cover for me. Laura's body suddenly stiffened when she heard this, her eyes widened and her face was full of shock. Just as she was about to speak, Ryan gently pressed her lips with his fingers. The kidnapping when I was a child is a nightmare that I will never forget in my life. Being locked in that dark and cold abandoned warehouse, I struggled in fear and despair every day, and my body and mind were greatly stimulated and hurt. Since then, in the long years of growing up, it is difficult for me to completely trust anyone. I always feel that everyone approaches me with a purpose. Ryan's eyes flashed with pain, and the hand holding Laura tightened unconsciously. But you are different, Laura. If you hadn't stepped forward desperately, I wouldn't be who I am now. You gave me not only the salvation of life, but also the courage to believe in this world again. Ryan said, taking out an exquisite velvet box from his pocket and opening it. A dazzling diamond ring lay quietly inside. The diamond on the ring face was pure and shining, and a circle of tiny gems were inlaid around it, shining brightly under the candlelight. I am willing to give you everything I have, including the entire group. Laura, are you willing to marry me, become the most important person in my life, and spend the rest of my life with me? Ryan's voice was full of affection and his eyes were full of expectation. Laura looked at Ryan in front of her with mixed feelings in her heart. This sudden happiness made her feel extremely sweet, but her heart was filled with pain and entanglement. She knew that accepting this proposal meant completely facing her complicated identity and dangerous mission. Her hands trembled slightly, tears flashed in her eyes, and she hesitated for a long time and finally said slowly, "Ryan, I need some time to think about it. This is too sudden for me." A trace of loss flashed in Ryan's eyes, but he still smiled with understanding, held Laura's hand and said, "Okay, I'll wait for you no matter how long it takes." After leaving the hotel, Laura was struggling in her heart. She knew that she couldn't hesitate like this anymore. So she decided to find the boss of the killer organization and show her that she couldn't complete this task. She came to the organization's secret base, which was an abandoned factory on the edge of the city. It was deserted and overgrown with weeds. Abandoned machine parts were scattered all over the ground, filled with an old and dilapidated atmosphere. The door of the factory was closed and rusty, as if telling the vicissitudes of time. Laura walked into the factory, which was dim and silent. Only a few shabby lamps emitted a faint light. The lights flickered in the dark as if they would go out at any time. There were all kinds of debris piled up in the corner and the dust was filled, making people cough. The boss sat on a worn-out chair looking at Laura with sharp eyes. The air around him seemed to freeze and there was a sense of oppression. Laura mustered up her courage and told the boss everything that had happened. Her voice was trembling, nervous and firm. "Boss, I fell in love with Ryan. He's a kind person. I can't kill him. And he is the little boy I saved that year. There is a deeper bond between us." After hearing her words, the boss's face was gloomy and he was silent for a long time. She stood up and walked slowly, and every step seemed to be stepping on Laura's heart. Finally, the boss sighed deeply and told her that the mission was terminated. It turned out that because the mission had not been completed for a long time, the organization was also investigating and found some discrepancies. They found that the actual controller of this business empire did not commit any illegal or criminal acts as the previous intelligence said. On the contrary, he has always adhered to the principles of fairness and integrity in his business activities. Laura was relieved and a big stone in her heart finally fell to the ground. But the boss's next words made her fall into new contemplation. "Although the mission has been terminated, the organization has trained you for so many years. You can't leave so easily. We hope that you can use your identity in the group to provide the organization with some useful information." The boss's eyes revealed unquestionable majesty. Laura was very conflicted. On the one hand, she longed to get rid of the shackles of the killer organization and live an ordinary life with Ryan. On the other hand, she had a sense of affection for the organization that was hard to give up. She didn't know how to choose, so she could only lower her head silently, struggling painfully in her heart. Chapter 10. A new starting point for happiness. In the days after leaving the hotel, Laura seemed to be in the center of an invisible storm, and her heart was swept by countless complex emotions. The past of the killer organization, her love with Ryan, and the unfinished mission, all of these were like a tangled mess that entangled her and made it difficult for her to breathe. She locked herself in the room, thinking over and over again, and the sweet moments of getting along with Ryan and the bloody and dark days in the organization kept emerging in her mind. After several days and nights of careful consideration, Laura finally made a decision. She realized that accepting Ryan's proposal would not only mean having a true love, but also saying goodbye to the past life full of danger and disguise. No longer having to perform those life-and-death missions, no longer having to play various false roles to achieve the goal, this is undoubtedly a relief for her. Moreover, if it is just to provide some information to the organization to continue to punish those evil villains, it does not seem unacceptable. When Laura found Ryan and saw the uneasiness and expectation in his eyes, her heart trembled suddenly. She walked slowly to Ryan, took a deep breath and said, "Ryan, I've made up my mind. I am willing to marry you." As soon as the voice fell, Ryan's eyes instantly turned red and tears burst out. He was so excited that he couldn't speak, but just hugged Laura tightly in his arms as if at this moment he owned the whole world. Laura also hugged him back tightly, feeling this hard-won happiness, and the haze in her heart gradually dissipated. The days of preparing for the wedding were busy and sweet. Ryan used all his resources just to give Laura a dream wedding. On the wedding day, the entire venue was beautifully decorated. White flowers bloomed like an ocean, and the air was filled with the fragrance of happiness. Laura wore a white wedding dress, like a princess in a fairy tale, her eyes full of tenderness and determination. Ryan wore a handsome suit and looked at Laura affectionately, as if everything in the world no longer existed, and only each other was in his eyes. With the blessings of everyone, Laura and Ryan exchanged rings and made a lifelong commitment. Once, when Ryan was a child, he described the outside world to Laura, and those beautiful visions became Laura's yearning. Now they can finally join hands to venture into the world and write their own stories together. After marriage, Laura began to slowly integrate into Ryan's business world. With her wisdom and unique insight, she made suggestions for the development of the group and became Ryan's indispensable right-hand man. And she and the organization have also reached a delicate balance. Without violating her conscience and principles, she provides the organization with some information that is beneficial to society and helps the organization continue to fight those real evil forces. The legend of this business empire continues to unfold, and the outside world is still full of curiosity about its real helmsman, but no one has ever been able to solve the mystery. No one has guessed that this mysterious helmsman married his childhood savior, and the two live an extremely happy life. The love between Laura and Ryan is like a beautiful dream carefully woven by fate. From their childhood encounter to their love in adulthood, this journey is full of twists and turns and surprises. This is a destined redemption and the most precious treasure of their lives.